The silk dress was identical to my mother's burial gown. Elena wore it to dinner, smiling like she owned the memory. I lunged for her hair, proof she wasn't who she claimed. But her brother crushed me against the marble countertop. My ribs screamed, but my fingers closed around her clutch. Inside, a receipt for a shovel bought under a fake name. The auction she claimed to attend? A lie. The warehouse address burned in my palm. She was burying something, and I was next. The dossier hit the granite island with a heavy thud, scattering photographs of Jennifer Vance across the polished surface. Maya Sterling's fingers trembled against the manila folder, the paper edges sharp against her skin. In the photos, the woman now sleeping upstairs stood in a different life, under a different name, smiling beside men who had since vanished from public records. Maya counted the steps in her head. 1, 2, 3, keeping her pulse steady as she looked at her father. Thomas didn't glance at the evidence. He continued swirling his scotch, the ice cubes clinking like a rhythmic warning against the crystal glass. Beside him, William Miller leaned against the refrigerator, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. The kitchen smelled of expensive peat and the lingering, cloying scent of Jennifer's lavender perfume, a smell that seemed to coat the very walls of the Greenwich estate. "Look at the dates, Dad," Maya whispered. Her throat tightened, dry as parchment. "The passports, the wire transfers? She's been draining the estate accounts since the funeral. This woman isn't who she says she is. She's a ghost, a fabrication." Thomas finally set his glass down. He didn't reach for the file. Instead, he reached for William's shoulder, a silent alliance forged in a single gesture. A small, pitying smile pulled at the corners of her father's mouth, the kind of expression he reserved for wounded animals or broken toys. "You're exhausted, Maya," Thomas said. His voice carried the smooth, terrifying calm of a judge delivering a sentence. "The grief has twisted your perception. William and I discussed this. We think a stay at the clinic in Vermont would help you find your footing." Maya recoiled, her hip bumping the counter. The architectural honesty of the room felt compromised, the weight of their judgment pressing down like a collapsing ceiling. "I'm showing you the theft. I'm showing you a predator in our house, and you're talking about clinics?" "We see exactly what's happening," William interjected, his gaze fixed on the floor. He tapped his silver fountain pen against his chin. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. "You're lashing out because you can't accept your father moved on. It's a common psychological break, really. The documents you've assembled, they lack legal standing. They are the products of an obsessed mind." Thomas stepped forward, sliding the dossier into the trash bin without breaking eye contact. The heavy paper slid against the plastic liner with a hiss. "Go pack a bag, sweetheart. The car arrives at dawn." Maya felt a surge of heat beneath her skin. The logic of the world was failing. She looked at the trash can, then at the stairs. She needed proof that was more than just paper. She needed something biological, something undeniable. The air in the kitchen grew thick with the smell of scorched coffee from the machine in the corner. Maya's eyes darted to the doorway as Jennifer Vance drifted into the room. She was wearing a silk robe that shimmered like oil on water, her movements fluid and predatory. She didn't look like a woman who had just woken up. She looked like an actress stepping onto a stage. "Is everything all right, honey?" Jennifer asked, her voice like honey poured over gravel. She moved toward Thomas, her hand reaching out to anchor herself to his forearm. "Maya was just leaving," Thomas said, his voice straining to maintain its composure. "I'm not leaving until I have the truth," Maya snapped. She lunged forward before her brain could veto the impulse. Her fingers aimed for Jennifer's scalp, desperate to snag a handful of the blonde hair that looked so much like her mother's. The struggle was instantaneous and ugly. Maya's nails caught on Jennifer's skin, drawing a thin line of red. Jennifer let out a sharp, practiced shriek. The sound echoed off the high ceilings like a bird trapped in a chimney. "Get off her!" a voice roared. Richard Vance, Jennifer's brother, burst from the shadows of the pantry. He didn't move like a man. He moved like a falling wall. He grabbed Maya's shoulders, his fingers digging into her skin through her thin sweater. He swung her around with a grunt of exertion, his scarred knuckles white with the effort. Maya's world tilted. The floor rushed up to meet her, but instead, she hit the edge of the marble island. A sharp, white-hot pain blossomed in her ribs, a structural failure of her own body. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs in a ragged burst. Richard held her there, pinned against the cold stone, his breath smelling of stale cigarettes and peppermint. "Don't you ever touch her," Richard hissed. His eyes were wide, darting toward a bowl of strawberries on the counter. He recoiled slightly from the red fruit, his grip tightening on Maya's arms until she felt the bone groan. "Richard, that's enough," Thomas shouted, though he made no move to pull the man away. Jennifer was sobbing now. A soft, rhythmic sound that Maya recognized as the hospice hum turned into a weapon of sympathy. She huddled against Thomas's chest, her face hidden. Richard gave Maya one final shove, a physical punctuation mark to her humiliation. She slumped to the floor, her glasses sliding down her nose. Her ribs throbbed with every heartbeat, a dull, heavy rhythm. Through the haze of pain, Maya saw Jennifer's designer clutch lying on the floor, discarded during the scuffle. She didn't think. She acted. While the men were focused on the victim, Maya's hand snaked out, her fingers brushing the buttery leather of the purse. She slid it under her sweater, the cold metal of the clasp biting into her skin. "Go to your room, Maya," Thomas ordered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and shame. "Now." Maya stood up, counting the paces as she backed away. 1, 2, 3. She didn't look back until she reached the safety of the dark hallway. Upstairs, the silence of her bedroom felt like a vacuum. She locked the door, her breath coming in shallow, jagged hitches. Her ribs felt like they had been rewritten by a sledgehammer. She sat on the edge of her bed and pulled the stolen clutch from her waistband. The leather was expensive, smelling of sandalwood and new money. Maya dumped the contents onto her duvet. A gold lipstick, a compact mirror, a set of keys, and a crumpled slip of paper. She smoothed the paper out on her knee. It wasn't a boutique receipt for jewelry or clothes. It was a thermal printout from a place called Holloway Industrial Supply. The date was 3 days ago. The item, one heavy-duty trenching shovel, fiberglass handle, sharpened blade. The name on the receipt wasn't Jennifer Vance. It was C. Sterling. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Her mother's name. Used to buy a tool meant for digging deep into the earth. The logic of the purchase was clear, and it was terrifying. You don't buy a sharpened shovel for gardening in Greenwich. You buy it for a task that requires breaking through heavy, settled soil. She stared at the address for Holloway Industrial. It was in a part of town she never visited, an area of warehouses and gray concrete. She checked the time on her phone. 2 a.m. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. She couldn't wait for dawn, She couldn't wait for the car to take her to Vermont. Maya grabbed her keys and a dark jacket. She climbed out the window, her feet finding the familiar notches in the trellis. She counted the drops to the ground, 1, 2, and vanished into the shadows of the manicured hedges. The drive to the industrial district took 20 minutes. The transition from the white picket perfection of the estate to the rusted reality of the warehouse district was jarring. The air here smelled of wet pavement and diesel exhaust. She found the address. It was a massive, windowless structure of corrugated steel. A single flickering light hung over the loading dock, casting long skeletal shadows across the gravel lot. There was no boutique here, no high-end storefront. Maya killed her headlights and sat in the dark. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the metallic pinging of her cooling engine. She stepped out of the car, her boots crunching on the grit. The loading dock smelled of alkaline cleaner and old grease. She saw a trash bin near the side door, overflowing with industrial scraps. Tucked into the side of the bin was a discarded cardboard sleeve, the kind used to protect the blade of a new shovel. She picked it up. It was caked with a dark, rich soil that didn't match the gray dust of the warehouse. It was the deep, loamy earth found in the private wooded areas of the northern estates. The truth hit her with the weight of a load-bearing beam. Jennifer hadn't just bought a shovel. She had already used it. And she had used her mother's name to do it. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. "The foundation is shifting, Maya. Are you sure you want to be under it when it falls?" She looked up at the warehouse, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. She wasn't alone. She could feel eyes on her from the darkness of the loading bays. She scrambled back to her car, the counting in her head becoming a frantic, disorganized mess. When she returned to the estate, the sun was beginning to bleed over the horizon, a sickly orange light that offered no warmth. She slipped back through her window, her body aching with a fatigue that felt permanent. She headed for her father's study, the receipt clutched in her hand. She found him sitting behind his mahogany desk, staring at a blank piece of paper. The Sunday rewrite. He was holding his late wife's grocery list, his hand trembling as he prepared to copy the words milk, eggs, flour for the 1,000th time. "Dad, listen to me," Maya said, her voice cracking. She threw the receipt onto his desk. "She's using Mom's name. She bought a shovel at an industrial warehouse. Why would she need that? Why would she use Mom's identity to buy a tool for digging?" Thomas didn't look at the paper. He didn't even blink. He just stared at the grocery list. "I signed the papers this morning, Maya." "What papers?" "The power of attorney and the medical directive." He finally looked up, and his eyes were hollow, like rooms that had been stripped of their furniture. "Jennifer is in charge of the estate now, and she's in charge of your care. You gave her everything?" Maya's voice rose to a shriek. "She's a thief. I just showed you. I don't care," Thomas roared, slamming his fist onto the desk. The grocery list fluttered to the floor. "I don't care if she's a saint or a devil, Maya. She gives me peace. She wears the perfume. She speaks with the same rhythm. When I'm with her, the house doesn't feel like a tomb." "It's a lie, Dad. You're living in a blueprint of a house that burned down." Thomas stood up, his stature imposing even in his grief. "If you say one more word against her, if you mention that warehouse or those files again, I will call the men from the clinic right now. I will have you carried out of here in restraints. Do you understand me? This is your final warning. Accept your new mother, or lose your freedom." Maya backed out of the room, her hands over her mouth. The betrayal was a physical weight, a ceiling joist snapping and pinning her to the floor. She retreated to her bathroom, needing to wash the smell of the warehouse off her skin. She stepped into the shower and turned on the water, letting the steam rise around her. But as the water hit the tiles, a different scent filled the air. It wasn't soap. It was the sharp, floral explosion of l'air du temps. Her mother's signature scent. Maya looked down. Shattered glass lay scattered across the shower floor like diamonds. A vintage crystal bottle, one of the last few her mother had owned, had been smashed against the drain. The rare, discontinued oil was swirling away into the pipes, a fragrant ghost being flushed into the sewer. "No," Maya whispered, dropping to her knees. She didn't care about the glass cutting her shins. She tried to cup the water, to save even a drop of the scent, but it was gone. She heard a click. She lunged for the bathroom door, but it was too late. The heavy oak door thudded shut. She heard the turn of the key in the lock, a sound that shouldn't have been possible, as there were no locks on the outside of the bedroom doors. Jennifer had modified the house. She had changed the architecture of Maya's sanctuary. "Hush now, Maya," a voice drifted through the wood. Jennifer was humming, the low, vibrating dirge of the hospice. "It's time for the house to be quiet." "You're so loud, darling. So very loud." Maya pounded on the door, her screams muffled by the thick insulation. "Let me out. You're a monster. The doctor will be here in the morning," Jennifer said, her voice receding down the hall. "We'll get those nasty thoughts out of your head. We'll make everything smooth again." Maya slumped against the door, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. She was trapped in a cage of her father's making, guarded by a woman who was slowly erasing the woman Maya loved. Subverted beat 2.2. Maya sat on the edge of the tub, the cold water still drumming against the tiles. She took a deep breath, forcing her mind to work like a drafting program. She needed to be smart. She needed to use the one thing her father still valued, the legacy of the sterling name. She waited until she heard the distant sound of the front door closing, Thomas leaving for his morning walk. She used a heavy brass towel rack to pry the hinges of the bathroom door. It took 20 minutes of agonizing labor, her bruised ribs screaming with every twist of the metal, but finally the door groaned and gave way. She didn't run. She went straight to her father's study. She found him on the terrace, staring out at the fog-covered lawn. "Dad," she said, her voice calm, professional. "I'm sorry, you're right. I've been acting out of grief. I went to that warehouse because I was looking for a reason to hate her. But I see now that I was just trying to fill a void." Thomas turned, a look of profound relief washing over his face. He stepped forward and took her hands. "Oh, Maya, I knew you'd come around. I knew you just needed to see the light." "I do?" Maya said, forcing a smile. "And to show you I'm serious, I want to help with the transition. I want to go over the estate papers with William. I want to make sure Jennifer is protected. It's what Mom would have wanted." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "You're a Sterling through and through. Thank God. I'll call William. We'll have a meeting this afternoon. We'll fix everything." For 3 hours, Maya felt a sense of victory. She sat in the library, ostensibly reviewing ledger books, while Thomas watched her with paternal pride. He brought her tea. He patted her shoulder. The tension that had strangled the house for weeks began to dissipate. Maya felt like she had finally outmaneuvered the predator. She had gained his trust. Now she could use that access to find the real evidence. The crack appeared at 4 p.m. William Miller arrived, but he wasn't carrying the estate folders. He was carrying a single, slim briefcase and was accompanied by two men in white shirts Maya didn't recognize. "Where are the ledgers, William?" Maya asked, her heart beginning a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. Thomas stepped into the room, and the warmth was gone from his face. It had been replaced by a cold, clinical detachment. "I'm so sorry, Maya," Thomas said. "But your apology was the final proof William needed. He told me that a sudden, complete reversal of a delusional system is the most dangerous stage of a break. It's called the calm before the storm." Maya's jaw dropped. "What? No, You were trying to manipulate me," Thomas said, his voice flat. "You were trying to gain access to the accounts so you could prove your theories. You even used your mother's memory to do it. That's the most heartbreaking part." William tapped his pen. 1, 2, 3, 4. "The commitment papers are already signed, Maya. Your father gave me the authority an hour ago. Your cooperation today only served to confirm the diagnosis of sociopathic masking." The two men in white stepped forward. "Wait," Maya cried, backing toward the window. "Look at the warehouse receipt. Look at the perfume." "We found the perfume bottle in your room, Maya," Jennifer said, appearing in the doorway. She looked sad, her eyes damp with performative grief. "You must have smashed it in a fit of rage. I found the glass and cleaned it up so you wouldn't hurt yourself. It was so violent." Maya realized the trap. Every smart move she had made, the apology, the request for the papers, had been anticipated and turned into a symptom. She hadn't outmaneuvered them. She had walked right into the blueprint of her own incarceration. "Take her," Thomas said, turning his back. The men moved with practiced efficiency. Maya fought, but she was already weakened. As they dragged her toward the door, she saw Jennifer standing by the fireplace, holding the warehouse receipt. Jennifer caught Maya's eye and slowly, deliberately, fed the paper into the flames. "Don't worry, darling," Jennifer whispered as Maya was hauled past. "The house will be so quiet now. Just the way I like it." Maya was forced into the back of a black sedan, the child safety locks clicking into place with a sound like a guillotine. But as the car pulled away, she saw something in the rearview mirror. A black SUV was idling at the end of the driveway. Richard, he wasn't there to watch her go. He was waiting for her to escape. Maya didn't go to the clinic. Halfway down the Merritt Parkway, the sedan was clipped by the SUV. The impact was calculated, a precision strike to the rear quarter panel. The sedan spun, the world becoming a blur of gray asphalt and green trees. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maya counted as the car rolled into the ditch. She woke up to the smell of smoke and the sound of dripping fluid. The orderlies were unconscious, slumped over the deployed airbags. Maya kicked the shattered window and crawled out, her hands bleeding, her ribs a symphony of agony. She looked at the SUV, which had stopped 20 yards away. A figure in a black mask stood by the driver's door, watching her. Maya didn't run for the road. She ran for the woods. She knew these trees. She knew the geometry of this land. She reached the edge of the private family cemetery by nightfall. The iron gates were rusted, the air unnaturally cold. She knelt by her mother's headstone, her breath hitching in the dark. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. She looked at the ground. The soil around the grave was disturbed. Not much, just a slight misalignment of the turf. She reached out and brushed the grass aside. A scrap of white lace was caught in the dirt. Maya pulled it free. It was delicate, hand-embroidered. It was a piece of the burial dress, the shovel, the warehouse, the name C. Sterling. Jennifer hadn't just stolen her mother's life. She had dug her up. Maya sat in the dirt, the lace clutched in her hand. The logic of the crime was finally clear. Jennifer wasn't just an impostor. She was a scavenger. She was wearing the clothes of the dead to convince the living. She spent the next few hours in a local library, her fingers flying across the keyboard of a public computer. She didn't look for bank records this time. She looked for people. She found it in a digitized archive of a small hospice in upstate New York. A staff photo from 4 years ago. There, in the back row, was Jennifer. But the name tag didn't say Vance. It said Jennifer Miller. Maya froze. Miller. She looked at the photo of the hospice's board of directors. Sitting in the center, looking 20 years younger, but with the same silver hair and the same silver pen, was William Miller. The lawyer wasn't just an accomplice. He was the architect. Jennifer wasn't a random predator. She was William's daughter. The secret child of a man who had spent 40 years watching the sterling fortune and decided it was time to take a seat at the table. Maya felt a cold, hard resolve settle in her chest. The house was a lie. The law was a lie. But the architecture of the truth was still there, buried under the layers of deception. She returned to the estate under the cover of a thunderstorm. The rain turned the driveway into a river of mud. She saw the crates in the foyer through the window. Thomas was moving. He was fleeing the crime scene he didn't even know he had created. Maya slipped through the cellar door, her heart counting the steps. 1, 2, 3. She found the vanity in the guest room where Jennifer was staying. She didn't look for jewelry. She looked for the architectural lies. She ran her fingers along the back of the mirror, feeling for the seam. There, a hidden compartment. She pulled it open. Inside was her mother's wedding ring, the diamond encrusted with dried mud, and a journal. Maya opened the book. The handwriting was a perfect mimicry of her mother's, but the words were pure poison. October 14th. Thomas mentioned the lavender. I must buy more. He likes the way I tilt my head when I'm tired. Catherine used to do it. I am becoming the air he breathes. Soon, there will be no room for the girl. It's a beautiful book, isn't it? Maya spun around. Jennifer was standing in the doorway, a heavy bronze award in her hand. The light from the hallway caught the gold of the trophy, making it look like a weapon of the gods. You dug her up, Maya said, her voice steady. You took the ring off a corpse. Jennifer smiled, and for the first time, the honey was gone. Her face was sharp, hungry. I took what was mine. My father spent his life serving yours. He watched Thomas waste millions while we lived in a townhouse in Queens. I'm just balancing the ledger, Maya. You're a grave robber, Jennifer, and a fraud. I'm the new Mrs. Sterling, Jennifer said. She lunged. The bronze award whistled through the air, shattering the vanity mirror. Glass exploded like a frozen star. Maya dove for the floor, her ribs screaming. She tackled Jennifer, the two of them crashing through the French doors and onto the terrace. The rain was a deluge now, blinding and cold. They tumbled across the stone, clawing and striking. Jennifer was stronger than she looked, her hands finding Maya's throat. You should have gone to the clinic, Jennifer hissed, her face inches from Maya's. It would have been so much easier. Maya felt her vision begin to gray. She reached out, her fingers finding a loose stone in the balustrade, a flaw in the masonry she had noticed years ago. She pulled with all her might. The stone came free. She slammed it into Jennifer's shoulder. Jennifer shrieked and let go. Maya scrambled back, gasping for air. Stop it, both of you. Thomas stood in the doorway, his face a mask of horror. He was holding a flashlight, the beam cutting through the rain. "Dad!" Maya cried. "I have the ring. I have her journal. She's William's daughter. They're stealing everything." Maya held up the mud-stained ring, the diamond catching the light of the flashlight. She felt a surge of hope. This was it. The physical proof, the undeniable truth. Thomas stepped onto the terrace. He looked at the ring. He looked at the journal lying in the mud. Subverted beat 3.5. Thomas walked toward Maya. His steps were slow, deliberate. He reached out his hand. "Give it to me, Maya," he said softly. Maya handed him the ring, her heart swelling. "You see, Dad? You see what she did?" Thomas looked at the ring for a long moment. Then he looked at Jennifer, who was huddled on the ground, shivering. "I know," Thomas said. Maya blinked. "What?" "I know she's William's daughter," Thomas said, his voice rising over the sound of the rain. "I've known since the day she walked into the hospice. William told me everything. He told me he had a daughter who looked just like Catherine, a daughter who had studied her, who could bring her back." Maya felt the world tilt. The foundation wasn't just shifting, it was gone. You hired her? I couldn't live without her, Maya." Thomas screamed, the grief finally breaking through his mask. "I was dying. The silence in this house was killing me. I didn't care where she came from. I didn't care if it was a lie. I asked her to wear the dresses. I asked her to use the perfume. I even told her where the ring was buried because I wanted her to wear it." The betrayal hit Maya like a physical blow to the chest. Her father hadn't been tricked. He had been the co-author of the horror. "You let her dig up Mom?" Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was just a body, Maya," Thomas said, his eyes wild. "Catherine is here now. She's in the kitchen. She's in the bed. Why can't you just let me have this?" He turned to the two men who had appeared behind him, the orderlies from the sedan, now looking grim and determined. "She's had a complete break," Thomas said, his voice dropping back into that terrifying calm judge's tone. "She's hallucinating. She thinks my wife is a ghost. Take her to the ward, and this time make sure she doesn't get out." Maya tried to run, but the terrace was a trap. The men grabbed her, their grip like iron. "Dad, please." Thomas didn't look at her. He helped Jennifer up, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "It's okay, Catherine. The noise is almost over. We're going to the islands tomorrow, just you and me." As Maya was dragged through the house, she saw William Miller standing in the foyer. He was holding the suitcase, his silver pen tapping against his chin. 1, 2, 3, 4. "A tragic end for a brilliant mind," William said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But the record will show she was always unstable." Maya was thrown into the wine cellar, the heavy steel door slamming shut with a finality that felt like the lid of a coffin. She sat in the dark, surrounded by the smell of damp earth and fermenting grapes. She could hear the sirens in the distance, the police coming to escort her to the asylum. But Maya was an architect. She knew that every house has a secret. She crawled to the back of the cellar, behind the racks of 1945 Bordeaux. She found the loose brick, the one her mother had shown her when she was a child. The service tunnels. She pushed the brick, and the wall groaned open. She crawled into the narrow, dusty passage, counting the turns. Left, right, straight for 20 paces. She emerged in the security hub in the basement. The monitors showed the police cars pulling into the driveway. Maya didn't run. She sat at the main terminal. She didn't need passwords. She needed the sensors. The Sterling estate was equipped with a state-of-the-art perimeter grid, including moisture and vibration sensors in the soil to detect intruders. She pulled up the logs for the cemetery sector. There it was. A massive spike in vibration 3 nights ago. And a secondary spike an hour later. She printed the logs. Then, she opened the digital archives of the estate's renovation plans. She found the architectural lies Jennifer had filed. The fake permits for the landscaping that were actually cover for the excavation. When the police burst into the room, Maya didn't fight. She held up the printouts. "I'm Maya Sterling," she said, her voice echoing in the sterile room. "I want to report a desecration of a grave. And I have the sensor data to prove exactly when and where the earth was broken." The lead officer, a man with tired eyes and a badge that gleamed in the fluorescent light, looked at the data. He looked at Maya's bruised face and bleeding hands. "This is a lot of paper, kid," he said. "It's not paper," Maya said. "It's the geometry of a crime." The arrest of Jennifer Vance was a quiet affair. The police found the ring and the burial lace in the getaway car, tucked into a hidden compartment in the trunk. But the real shock came in the back of the squad car. Jennifer didn't cry. She didn't plead. She looked at Maya through the glass and began to scream. "It should have been mine," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I'm a Sterling. I have the blood. Catherine was my sister. My father gave her everything while I was nothing. I didn't steal a life. I reclaimed it." The truth was a jagged shard of glass. Jennifer wasn't just a scammer. She was the product of Thomas's old sins, a half-sister Maya never knew existed, fueled by a lifetime of rejection. Thomas stood on the porch, watching as the woman he called Catherine was driven away. He looked small. He looked like a man who had finally run out of lies. Maya walked up to him. The rain had stopped, leaving the air smelling of ozone and wet cedar. "I'm leaving, Dad," she said. Thomas looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Maya, I just wanted to be happy." "You wanted a ghost," Maya said, "and you almost killed your daughter to keep it." She went inside and packed a single bag. She took the real photos of her mother, the ones where she wasn't smiling for the camera, but looking at the world with a sharp, observant gaze. She left the Greenwich estate as the sun began to rise. She didn't count the steps this time. She just walked. Her final stop was the cemetery. The police had cordoned off the grave, but the morning mist softened the harsh lines of the yellow tape. Maya stood over the mound of earth. It was being restored, the soil being packed back into place. She felt a hand on her shoulder. Not the heavy, crushing grip of Richard or the clinical touch of the orderlies. It was a light, ethereal sensation. "I found the truth, Mom," Maya whispered. "The architecture is sound now." She turned and walked toward her car. She was going to Seattle. She was going to build something new, something honest. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The estate was a speck in the distance, a gilded cage that no longer held any prisoners. Maya Sterling took a deep breath, the air clear and cold. She didn't need to count anymore. The world was finally in alignment.